Hello, everyone, and welcome. I think we'll have a few more people joining us in the next minute or so, but let's get started because I know this is a busy time of the year for lots of folks, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time and get to as many questions as possible. My name is Lisa Rodacher. I am the Assistant Dean for Law Admissions here at Washington and Lee University School of Law. Thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule today to join us. I'm excited to bring this topic to you all. It's something we get a lot of questions about from students who are eagerly thinking about their 3 years of legal education, and they're thinking about ways that they can dive into topics that are really of importance to them or that they'd like to learn more about, and also different ways to connect with faculty, different ways to develop their skill sets, different ways to really hone their abilities as they move forward into the profession. So we're going to get into all of that today, talking about research opportunities, journal options here. We've got some great panelists for you. We have Professor Andrew Christensen, who is the Deputy Director of the Law Library here, and two great 3L students that I've had the pleasure of working with these past few years, Scott Coven and Winnie Zhang, both really involved students in some of these opportunities who will be able to give really good insight for you and offer to answer a lot of questions. So we do want this to be as interactive as we can possibly make it. We have some pre-prepared questions. Some questions were sent in advance when you all registered, so thank you for that. But please do utilize the Q&A function or the chat, whichever you prefer. I will be moderating both, or monitoring both rather, and we'll make sure to work in your comments as we go forward. So I'll start by asking our panelists to spend a brief period of time just introducing themselves. Professor Christensen, I'll ask you to begin if you don't mind.
Sure. Thanks, Dean Rodacher. So my name is Andrew Christensen. I am one of several what we call dual degree law librarians here at Washington Lee. In addition to my JD, I have a master's in library and information science. In my current position, I oversee all of the research and reference operations at our law library. I also teach the legal research class, the required 1L legal research class that if you choose to come here, and actually a lot of schools, if you do go there, you'll be required to take a legal research class that works in tandem with the legal writing, legal fundamental skills as a lawyer you learn right away as a 1L. Also significant for today's discussion, I oversee a pool or a group of 2L and 3L students who work as research assistants under the law library, right? So we work on a number of tasks every month for various members of the faculty here. So these can be short projects that take generally about 10 hours or less, and they run the gamut from doing historical research, interdisciplinary stuff, maybe updating data sets, preparing for like a news interview, all kinds of things that we do. So but and I work closely with the journals as well, both the Law Review and the JCRSJ, which you have representatives of here as well. And I work with them and their online presence in particular. So yeah, good to talk to you all today.
Thanks so much, Professor Christensen. Winnie, you are my next square on my Zoom screen, if you don't mind sharing.
Absolutely. My name is Winnie, and I'm a 3L student here on the Journal of Civil Rights and Social Justice as a note editor. And I'm formerly from Houston, Texas. Other activities that I'm involved in that's kind of in the same sphere would be being a Burke Scholar here, which is essentially kind of like a writing TA for the 1L writing courses.
Thank you so much, Winnie. And Scott, that brings us to you, please.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm also a 3L. I am from Burke, Virginia originally, and before law school, I was a teacher and musician. Yeah, I really enjoyed my time here at WNL generally. In terms of what I'm involved in, I serve as the editor-in-chief for the WNL Law Review, which we'll probably talk about this a little bit more as we go along, but kind of writing and research are just our bread and butter in terms of editing articles that come in from scholars, all across the country in law schools and some practitioners. And then I also served as a research assistant for Professor Brandon Hasbrook last year. I no longer do that this year because I've been really busy with the journal stuff, but I'm happy to talk about that process as well. And I'm also just somebody who I would say like the research and writing, legal research and writing has been probably my favorite part about coming to law school in terms of the stuff that I've done in my summer jobs. And so I'm happy to talk about like what I've done practically as well.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. And I would be remiss, since we don't have a student representative from our other journal today, to not mention that we also have a German law journal here. Unfortunately, there was a schedule conflict and we couldn't have a panelist from that particular journal, but there are additional opportunities here at WNL, and that would be a signature one that we would want to make sure everyone is aware of. So we're going to dive into some questions. And the first is the question that we get posed in our office quite frequently: how do students get involved in research opportunities with faculty? And I think we'll take this first from your perspective, Professor Christensen, in terms of the research assistants that you might oversee or that you and your colleagues work with, and then also from students. You've probably been in the same position of wanting to dive into research with faculty. How have you seen students get involved? So Professor Christensen.
Sure. So as I mentioned in my introduction, as a 2L or a 3L, you're able to, if you're interested, to apply to be what's they're called the McThenia RAs, McThenia RA Research Assistant Program that we run from the library here. It's named from one of our esteemed emeritus faculty members, Uncas McThenia. And so that's a group of about, I think currently I have 3, but it ranges from 3 to 5 generally every year, who work on like I said, generally there's something in the air that somebody's juggling at any given time. Probably 2 or 3 of them are working on something. But throughout the whole year, when it's all said and done, every one of those students will probably work with about 5 or so different projects for maybe 5 different professors, 3 or 4 at least. And also that opportunity extends into summer as well. Even if you're working remotely, you can work with me remotely on projects I would oversee and kind of be the liaison and facilitate the communication with the faculty member, or kind of get you in the direction of resources that you need to get what they need. So that's something that I do. Again, that's the McThenia RA program. I think Dean Rodacher's putting those links in the chat, it looks like. So if you want to see more about that program, that's on our website. And then also, as Scott mentioned, he has actually had that experience of working as an RA for an individual professor. So that is possible too. All of our faculty have a budget to these are paid positions too. I did not maybe make that clear, but these are paid positions either through the McThenia program or working for an individual professor, or you get paid an hourly rate. It's nothing large, but it is helpful when you're in law school. Every little bit counts. And then you would work individually with that professor on some maybe a longer term project that would go longer than about the 10 hours or so you spend if you're one of my McThenia RAs. But I'll let one of the other panelists talk about that, since they've had that experience, at least Scott has. So.
That'd be great to get a student perspective as well, both on sort of how you express interest in that, and then how you would go forward with a faculty member in that role.
Yeah, so one of the cool things about WNL is that because of how small of a community that we are, class sizes between like 120 to 150, the connection to the faculty is really it's really easy to make those connections. And so I came into law school actually being interested already in Professor Hasbrook's work, and then I happened to take a class with him my 1L year. And so basically, and I know a number of students have had the same experience, where you just kind of connect with a professor because it's easy to do so. And then you sort of say, hey, do you have any openings for research assistants? Do you typically hire research assistants? And for me, it was just that easy. There were a few other people who were also interested in working with him. And so I think there were 2 or 3 of us last year who helped him out. And basically, it's, as Professor Christensen mentioned, it's whatever the faculty members' interests are at the time. And so it could be, kind of pure legal research, look into the background of this doctrine, and I'm looking to write about this or whatever. And it can involve a lot of case law, but it can also involve sort of other, like you might be looking into, one of the things I did last year was look into the professional backgrounds of basically every single judge in Virginia to see what kind of professional diversity we're getting on the bench. And so that was something cool. And that's like Professor Christensen mentioned, part of more of a long-term project. It's not like you have, a short span of time to accomplish something. And I also helped, prepare slides and questions for when Professor Hasbrook was a panelist at various events, at other law schools or even at our law school. So yeah, I guess in conclusion, what I would say about that is it's all about sort of making that connection with the faculty member, which again is something really easy to do. This is probably more of a conversation for other admissions events, but there's kind of an open door policy here with the faculty where you're able to just go in and talk to them. And so that was basically how I accomplished that. And yes, it is paid. And so that's a really useful thing too. A lot of people will continue to do work over the summer. If you're working for an individual faculty member, you have that option as well. And that's really nice. And and the last thing I'll say about it is, especially when you're starting out and you're trying to sort of build your legal resume, you can put something like, I worked for this faculty member as a research assistant. That counts as, a professional position. And so it's also like a good, it can set you apart in that way. And it's a good thing to just sort of to have that resume line as well as you're starting to apply for jobs as a 1L and 2L and for post law school or for your 2L summer job. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Scott. And I think you leaned into my next question a little bit, which was for a student who doesn't necessarily know right now that research is something that's really exciting to them. Maybe they're still exploring what that means. You've given a very practical reason why engaging in research would be beneficial, right? As an opportunity to boost your resume. There's also lots of other reasons why engaging in research would be really beneficial. Maybe Professor Christensen or Winnie, maybe you can share some of the reasons, practical, academic or otherwise, that you feel this would be a really great way for students to spend their limited free time granted in law school or their limited time.
Yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit about that. I think that, for me, I never wrote a thesis undergrad. I never did any of those other things. If you told me I would be writing a, 30, 40 page note, I would laugh at you prior to coming to law school because it would just not be something that I realistically thought I would do. I would say the biggest thing when it comes to finding what you want to research is really honing in on what drives your passions. Why are you coming to law school? There must be something in the world that you believe you can contribute to, or some kind of area in the law that you want to be a part of. And I let kind of those interests drive what my note topic would be, drive all of that. Because when the research is getting difficult or the writing is getting difficult, that's what I think is the extra shove and push that is going to actually get you through to the finish line. So it's kind of about writing something different. I know we've tossed around a couple words like note and journal and all this stuff, and that was completely foreign to me when I was first registering for law schools, other than I knew you should probably be on a journal. That was floating somewhere in the advice. I think a note is really interesting, or student notes are really interesting because they're kind of, you're not allowed to write about just any topic. It has to be a topic that in a solution that no other kind of individual has written about. It's kind of your way to establish an area of the law that you believe you have a unique solution to, that other academic scholars can look at and take a look at your research and your proposed idea. So it's a great way for you as a student to actually make an impact in an area you care about right now before you even graduate. So I think that is the kind of unique part of a note. And I think that's why so many people want to do it, because they want to write about what they love about. So.
Thank you, Winnie. And you're right. Lots of people come to law school because they're really passionate about some aspect that law touches, which is very broad, but they really want to engage in further study in that. And that's a great way to really do so. Professor Christensen, do you have any other thoughts on sort of the benefits of engaging in research and taking a really deep dive into that?
Absolutely.
And subject matter?
Yeah. So regardless of, whatever area of law you go into, if you don't even practice, if you go into academia, if you go into a clerkship, whatever it is, research is going to really be fundamental to what you do. And in particular, going through the research, having learned how to do that and how to pay attention to detail, credibility, all of those skills as a professional, again, however you practice, whatever it is, when you have that JD behind your name that has a certain amount of credibility that's based in this person is an acknowledged professional expert, right? You have a legal education, you have a professional degree, and that professional standard of, again, attention to detail, properly formatting things, following rules is very important when you're filing briefs with the court. You're making those submissions to, if you're a scholar, submitting your work to a law review to be evaluated and hopefully published. All of those things, it's putting that best foot forward. So one of the things that I teach and I try to instill in my students And I definitely look for and want people, I feel like I do, when I do see them as 3Ls and 2Ls that come back to me when they're looking for advice on researching their note, or some pointers on developing their topic, it is that attention to detail that and kind of holistic understanding that of how important every little piece is, that is important, and how to draw those things together and put your best foot forward, and emerge on the other side of law school again looking every bit the professional that you actually are, and that it says that the diploma on your wall says you are. So that is all research is, again, fundamental to that whole thing. Is that ability to know and what to look, what you're looking for, and when you found it, and how to put it forth into the package that you need to, the product that you ultimately are going to submit, whether it's for a court or something that you're writing in some other capacity, or something you're going to be speaking about. It's all very important.
Fantastic, thank you. And you'll notice I have been dropping some links into the chat. I also put in the course description for the 1L legal research course. So as you're thinking about the actual time that you would spend in law school, we've talked about this as sort of a fundamental skill, a bread and butter skill. You would be taking legal research in the 1L year, and then there would be additional opportunities right throughout classes, and these additional opportunities to hone your skills further as you go forward. But that class description might be of interest. I see that we've got a question. Keep them coming. We're going to work them in. I do want to switch a little bit here in the near future to talk a little bit more about journals. And Winnie, you mentioned that journals were something that you had heard about generally coming into law school, but you didn't know a ton about. And we have a lot of students who are in that exact position. So I guess one, why would a student want to join a journal? And two, how does a student join a journal? And I'll give that Winnie to you first, and then Scott, I'd love for you to chime in as well.
Like I said, I think that okay, let's talk about practical. This is a thing that people commonly say. It's helpful on the resume that you're part of a journal, especially if you know you maybe want to work for a judge or a clerkship, and it's okay not to know at this point as well. I had no idea what the world looked like at this point. But if you want to do any of those things, typically being on a journal is not required, but preferred, and kind of bolsters your application. So that's the practical. But, why I joined the journal is because I was really interested. My journal focuses on civil rights and social justice. It's something that's really important to me. The note that I wrote focuses on an area that I really care about like specifically targeting like Chinese immigrants. That's something that's really personal to me, but also something that I had an interest in when I came to law school. So joining a journal gave me the ability to write a note. I didn't know if it was going to be published. Not everyone gets published, but you spend your kind of year self-researching, going through the process to write this note in a way that makes sense to the legal community in a structured format. And you get to learn so much through the process. And I think that that's the main, at least for me, in my perspective, the main incentive to join a journal. And I think how you join a journal is Write On. So there's this process called Write On. Every law school has it. It's at different intervals for law schools. Ours is typically right after finals, your 1L a year. So this is not something you have to worry about right now. But it's a culmination of a Blue Book quiz and a short memo that you write on. And then it's kind of like your application materials to the journal, and you get selected from there.
Thank you so much, Scott. I'm sure you have some thoughts from the law review side too.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, I definitely agree with the points that Winnie made. And I know a lot of students, like the main incentive for joining a journal is to write your own scholarship, which is awesome. Just a little bit more of like a 10,000 foot view of how journals operate within the legal profession. So it's pretty cool. Every single law school has, at least that I know of, every single top tier law school has these multiple journals at their school. That facilitate essentially scholarship. Like I mentioned earlier, and actually like Professor Christensen mentioned, faculty will write the scholarship in whatever field they might be interested in, or multiple fields, and they'll submit it to journals across the country. And then we as students facilitate that entire process. So we have a faculty advisor, but they only come in for advice or for just to talk about administrative stuff. Everything on the journal is run by students. You have an upper board as a 3L, and then you have staff writers, or the equivalent of 2Ls. And I'll explain more about that in a second. But it's a really cool process where you're actually facilitating the dialogue in the profession as a student. And so faculty have obviously gone out into the world, they've proved themselves, they have the credentials, they're experts in their field. But what's kind of cool is there's just this there's a balance between people who are new to the legal profession reading the scholarship that comes in and saying, hey, I think that this is really important, we should talk about this, and then people who have been in it for many years potentially, and they may have a certain view of a topic, but they still have to write it in such a way where the people who are young in the legal profession, people who are new in the legal profession, find it worthwhile. And so I find that to just be a really cool dynamic, and I'm sure it can be frustrating for professors, but I find it cool as a student. And yeah, like at the beginning of the year, I pointed out to our staff writers when they came on, this does have an effect within the actual judicial system as well. I a lot of times journal articles will be cited if there are to give background on a topic, or if there are novel legal theories being advanced in the argument, journal articles will be cited. At least in this past term, the Washington and Lee Law Review was cited in the Merrill versus Milligan case by the Supreme Court, which was the challenge to the Voting Rights Act. And that opinion came down by Chief Justice Roberts. And it was really cool to just see the W&L Law Review being cited there. And so that's sort of what we do. And then in terms of I think why you would want to be on one. So obviously it's that interest in kind of the academic side, but it's also people, like I mentioned at the beginning, like my main reason for joining a journal is, yes, of course, there's a practical component, and Winnie's absolutely right about that. I second that wholeheartedly. And there's also just, like I mentioned, I'm somebody who really enjoys the legal writing and the legal research. And so I was sort of happy to be writing during Write On and happy to be engaging in that process. I mean, it was right after finals, so it was tough, but it's stuff that I enjoyed doing. And just like Winnie mentioned, I loved writing my note. It was a really difficult experience, really challenging. But for people who are sort of interested in that writing, the methodical kind of writing and researching of your own topic, it's really fun. And it's also cool to, at the end of the day, we publish, our journal goes in print, or our online journal, the W&L Law Review online goes online, and you get to see your hard work basically out there, and that's really cool. And in terms of just, I don't know if you're going to talk about this, Lisa, but Winnie mentioned it. So in terms of preparing, Winnie's absolutely right. You don't need to be thinking about like, how do I get onto a journal right now? When you enter as a 1L, your mind is on figuring out how to read cases and just, figuring out how to handle your classes. And that's totally okay. What I told a couple 1Ls who asked me this year, what's the best way that you can prepare for Write On and prepare to be on a journal? What I said was, pay attention in your legal research class, pay attention in your legal writing class. And, that basically just focus on that, and those skills will come naturally, the skills that are necessary to cite well by the end of your 1L year and to write well by the end of your year, just by focusing on your coursework, I think is the best thing that you can do, particularly legal research and writing. So I've been talking a lot, so I will turn it back over.
That's really helpful though, Scott. Thanks so much for your perspective and for sharing some of those intricacies of the law journals. I think a lot of students have some surface level knowledge of those things, but thanks to both of you for diving into those a bit further. Professor Christensen, did you have anything else to share from your perspective on either why would a student want to join a journal, or things that you've picked up from your working with the journals in your role that you thought would be beneficial for our audience?
So yes, and I can speak from experience myself. I went to UVA for law school, and I was in the Virginia Law and Business Review. So I was a production editor. I mentioned it before. It's a big thing with me, but the attention to detail, the discipline to make sure that things are saying, site checking is a big thing. I don't know if that term has been mentioned by the of the students here on the call yet, but that's basically the process going through the footnotes, right? All the authorities and references that an author has cited in their material, basically all those things, and making sure they actually say what they say, right? So as I guess we call them staff writers here, right? That's like, as a 2L, kind of the junior member of the law review of the JCRSJ or the German Law Journal, you're going to have that experience, right? And it is relatively tedious. It can be maybe confusing if you haven't done it before, but definitely at the other end of that, you will be I think a lot of us who choose to attend law school are pretty detail oriented to begin with, but it's definitely something that a lot of people enjoy. And if not, it's an experience that you have to go through, and I think your work will be better for it at the end. Again, it's just a good skill to develop. So I would say that. let's see, I think, and this was mentioned before too, but it really is recognized as a very prestigious thing. I don't know if that word has been used yet, but it is something that for generations of lawyers they've recognized. Were you on Law Review? Were you on a journal? Where it's I maybe even a rite of passage to be considered of such. And there are definitely more opportunities I think than in the past. It was more exclusive historically than it is now. So I don't know if maybe. Um, I don't know the exact steps that maybe Law Review has taken here to make it more inclusive, but I know there have been, and I know even in the time when I was in law school that was something that the Law Review was very concerned with, and the number of journals also has expanded over the years in across academia, which is great for academia. It's great for students to get that experience. It's great for scholars trying to place their work and get it published. So yeah, in general, the whole endeavor of legal scholarship really is driven by journals and law reviews, and so that's a very very important thing for someone who teaches, who reads, who keeps track of developments in the law. Journals are key to that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor Christensen. You mentioned citation, and I want to go a little bit more into some of these skills that students are developing through these different opportunities. Specifically, I'm looking to talk about ways that we help students sort of hone research and citation skills, thinking about two options that we have. I'm sure you all have other ones that come to mind, but I'd like to talk about advanced legal research. We've talked about 1L required legal research, but then also Burke Scholars. So why don't we start with the advanced legal research, and then we'll go into Burke Scholars as something that we want to make sure all students know about here. So could we talk a little bit about that, Professor Christensen?
Sure. So advanced legal research, a lot of times it's abbreviated as ALR. Is an upper level class. It's an elective that you can take as a 2L or 3L. It's not necessarily offered every semester here. I'll be honest about that. I don't think it might have been even offered. I don't think it's on the slate this year for here at WNL, but it's in the catalog. That is a great class to build on the basis that you'll learn as a 1L in the required legal research class. But you'll go into more in depth about practice specific areas. Maybe will be a week on tax research, or there'll be a week on local ordinance law that isn't really covered in the state and federal level stuff that we talk about as a 1L. Might deal with more advanced administrative law research or legislative history. So there's international legal research is large too, right? UN materials or foreign international materials as well. So that is a curricular offering that we have. I have taught it once before. We have other librarians on deck who are able to do that as well. So that's the advanced legal research class, 2 credit class offered ideally once a year, one semester per year.
Thank you so much. And then the other opportunity that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned, though, if you all want to bring forth other opportunities to hone legal rights research that we haven't spoken of, please do, are Burke Scholars. And that's something that as students begin to dive into WNL offerings, they may come across and become more familiar with. When you have direct experience with that from your side, would you mind sharing a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that WNL I think does really well that just does really, really well is they ensure you have a mentor for literally everything. So you will get what's called a Curtis Fellow for your kind of like figuring out life questions and like the routine of law school, what you're supposed to be doing when. Then for your legal writing class, you will get a Burke Scholar, which is a 3L student who works closely with the professor to help with research and citation skills. They host office hours, they book one-on-ones with you, they will, sit you down and help you with your writing assignments before you turn them in. They'll teach you the Blue Book, and they'll also be able to help you understand citations that are confusing in the Blue Book and things like that. So that's what Burke Scholars for writing do. For research, they help you navigate these new systems you now have to learn, and you'll also have one for your research class. And then you also have Ratchford Fellows for your job applications. So there's a plethora of people to go to at all times with upperclassmen. We're very, very much a connected student body. There's not this like weird division of 1L, 2L, 3L. We all hang out together. We all help each other to the best of our ability. So that's what the Burke Scholars do for kind of facilitating that extra research and citation skills. As a 2L outside of journal and outside of research assistant, you're also able to continue practicing your writing, research, and citation skills through all of the different moot court options that we have. So you write like appellate briefs for those competitions, and you're able to kind of join in on those competitions to continue to practice those writings, get those sample prompts, and push yourself to be a better writer.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Scott, I don't know if you have any reflections on Burke Scholars or your experiences with them that you wanted to share. It's fine if you don't, but
I do actually, only that my 1L year, my Burke Scholar from my legal writing class was such a cool person, and they really helped me like with all aspects of law school, not just legal writing, but I found that they were like a really great go-to person, maybe like kind of the person I talked to the most that was a 3L. So I think it's a great program, and something that's very helpful for incoming 1Ls.
absolutely. A question was thrown into the chat that I wanted to pose to you all. Just a student looking to get a little bit of clarity about notes and the journal part. Do students write just one note during their 2L year, or do 3Ls also have the opportunity to write notes if on a law review or a journal, excuse me. So would either of you like to start with that?
I'm happy to start with that. Yeah. So sorry for any confusion earlier. You basically, for JCRSJ, which Winnie's on in law review, which I'm on, that your 2L year, you're going to write one note, which is like kind of a massive work of scholarship that you do. Like Winnie was saying earlier, I couldn't imagine doing something like that before I came here, but it ended up being one of the most rewarding things. And so you pick a topic that you're interested in, that you're passionate about. Like Winnie mentioned, it needs to be a novel area of legal scholarship. So that's one of the most difficult things, is finding something that hasn't already been discussed, and adding your voice to the scholarly dialogue. And so, yeah, that takes place your 2L year. And then what happens is at the end, and I believe JCRSJ and law review have a similar process, is at the end of your 2L year, once you've completed your note, it then the upper board reviews all the notes by everybody on the journal, and makes publication selections. And so I think for law review last year, we had 40 people on law review, and I think about 14 notes were selected for publication. And then, so if you're one of those 14 people where you're going to get published now in the journal, which is awesome, it's a really cool thing, you continue to work on that, obviously, your 3L year until it's published, and you'll go through the entire editing process that any faculty scholar would, if they were getting published for their article. And yeah, it's a big experience, and you do it one time, and it's a big part of your responsibilities as a 2L staff writer, in addition to cite checking, which is checking all the formatting and citations on author articles that come in, on faculty articles that come in. In addition to doing that cite checking, you also write your own piece of scholarship. And the one other thing I'll mention about it is it does count as your 2L writing requirement. And so if you are on a journal and you're writing the note, you don't have to take a seminar class where you have to write a research paper. You can forego that requirement. You're welcome to take a seminar class in addition to being on a journal, but you don't have to. So it's kind of one thing off your plate. If you choose to, you can just write your note, and you don't have to worry about writing a giant research paper for class or anything.
One thing that may help with trying to understand what notes look like, or just how lengthy they might be and things like that, is both of the journals, or all of the journals, are published. Each volume is published. So there's like fall book, spring book, different journals organize it in different ways, but you can actually take a look at all of the different student notes that have been published recently and see what they're writing about and how they write about it and what a note looks like. I wish I knew that before law school, so that'd be really likely interesting to look at.
Thank you for that, Winnie. I really appreciate that. And I realize that two things that we have not talked about still in relation to the journals are we typically do a symposium with our journals in a given year, and we also have a notes colloquium. So would our panelists like to chime in on what those are and kind of how they work into the lifeblood of what the journal is doing?
Yeah, so in addition to publishing legal scholarship, Historically, one of the most important functions of a journal has been to host a symposium where you address a cutting edge issue that's arising in the legal profession. You bring in scholars, sometimes judges from around the country to talk about that issue. Last year, I'll just speak for Law Review, but last year the symposium was on blockchain technologies. And then we then publish, based on the topic of the symposium, we then publish some of the panelists who were present at the symposium. We then publish them in the print journal. But last year was on blockchain technologies. This year, the Law Review Symposium is on voting rights in a politically polarized era. And so we have an awesome, that's going to be on February 16th, and we have an awesome lineup of panelists coming in. And so, yeah, that has historically just been something that is incredibly important to the work of a journal is not only publishing, but also bringing in people from around the country to engage in dialogue in the same room, or at least virtually in the same room. And so that's coming up for Law Review on the 16th. And then, like Dean Rodacher mentioned, there is also the Student Notes Colloquium that Law Review does, where basically the two Note Award winners, the two winners of the best notes that are getting published, have a chance at the beginning of the year to not only present on their note topic, but to also bring in faculty commenters from other institutions and from WNL to both speak and to write a comment on their note. So that's a really cool opportunity for those people. And that I think GLJ does something similar. I'm not sure if JCRSJ does something similar, but I know GLJ also does a presentation. That's the German Law Journal. I know that they do a presentation at the end of the year for some of the papers that have been written. But yeah.
Yeah, also to clarify, on the German Law Journal, they don't just write about German issues. I did not know that prior to coming to law school. They are an international journal, so they write about international issues, and they do a lot of like comparisons of different issues here in the United States to international legal systems and things like that. Since they're not here, just wanted to add that comment.
Thank you all so much for that. I really appreciate you filling everybody in on those additional topics. I think we talked about this a bit as we talked about journal opportunities and when you would write on. But one of the things we talk about a lot at WNL is the relative size of our student body to the opportunities here, and opportunities being relatively available. So as people who have gone through the journal process and the selection process, would it be fair to say that while it is not every student doesn't get to write on a journal, a fair portion of our students write on journals, and talk a little bit about how you feel that opportunity is extended to students?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Like Professor Christensen mentioned earlier, the opportunity to be on a journal has, expanded over the years. It's not quite as exclusive as it used to be, but basically, at WNL, because we have a small class size, but we have 3 journals, about maybe a little bit less, but about 2/3 of the student body is involved on either Law Review, JCRSJ, or GLJ. I think this year there's maybe like 36 2Ls on Law Review and around 20 2Ls on both GLJ and JCRSJ. So compared to other law schools, the opportunity to get onto a journal here at WNL, which again has lots of practical benefits and also lots of just benefits in terms of your skills, is relatively high here at WNL. And yeah, and that process again takes place at the end of 2L year. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions about that. And I don't know if Winnie has anything to add.
Just about, sorry, Lisa, the question was about like the write-on process, right?
We've had students who have, I think, had a perception that being on a journal is extremely limited, that it's highly competitive, and that it is perhaps only limited to a select few at the school. And while we certainly cannot and do not wish to mislead students that every student will get on a journal or the exact journal of their choice, generally speaking, here at WNL, we feel that we have a pretty strong opportunity ratio for our students. And so I wondered if you had anything to share about sort of the general sense of competition or access to journals.
Well, I think that at least from what I know of the process, especially the year that I was going through it, not everybody, you have to keep in mind, not everybody like applies or writes on to the journal. It's not like everybody's required to do so. Only people who genuinely want to be on a journal do it. And then out of that population, I would say a lot of those students then get the opportunity to be on a journal. So there's a preference, so you can choose what your preference tier is. So you can just include one journal. If like law review is all you want to be on, just the one journal, or Journal of Civil Rights and Social Justice, just the one journal, or you can pref them. So if you don't get into one, you can get into another. I know there's a few minute rules that later on with law review specifically that's separate, but in general, if you want to be on a journal, it's possible as long as you put in the work in Write On, and the opportunities are ample.
Thank you, Winnie. I appreciate that. And I will ask our audience if they have any final questions. We've had some great ones sent in. Please go ahead and utilize the Q&A or the chat. I see someone immediately took me up on that. That's excellent. I wanted to ask our panelists another question, and we've leaned into this a little bit, but I think a lot of students are thinking about this in terms of their long-term career objectives. How will this benefit my future employment opportunities? How does this connect to my career goals? And Professor Christensen, you started out by just saying, sort of as groundwork, these are critical skills regardless of where you want to practice. But if anyone has further thoughts about how these opportunities, this particular skill set is relatable to the professional side of a student's objectives, this would be a great time for it.
I'm happy to jump in real quick. Just like Professor Christensen mentioned earlier, these skills are going to be critical for you no matter where you go into the legal profession. And so I'm obviously not super experienced yet or anything, but in my 2 summer experiences I've had so far, my first summer I worked at a public defender's office, and then my second summer I worked at a law firm. And so much of the work that you do is you have a client now, so you have to research in such a way where you're trying to benefit your client, but the skills are still applicable. You have to figure out what the law is, and then you have to sort of figure out how you can make an argument for your client. But so many times it was just your supervisor coming into the room or emailing you and saying, hey, here's this discrete legal issue we have. Find me some cases that would seem to suggest that our client is in a better position or try to find case law on just this particular issue. And then especially in the law firm over the summer, it would be back and forth. Okay, thanks for giving me information on on XYZ. Can you dig in a little bit more to this legal issue that arose in this case? And so the ability to go into the legal databases, the ability to quickly ascertain what legal standards are at play in the cases that you're reading, and again, the attention to detail to be able to quickly, in a matter of minutes or hours, like Professor Christensen was saying, having the attention to detail to then write precisely to your supervisor about whatever the issue is in such a way where you're accurately communicating what the case law says. It's absolutely critical, and I think my summer experiences were just chock full of those kind of moments where the legal research skills came in handy.
I would second like what Scott said about the skills on the journal being the primary thing that you really it can set you apart. Journal has definitely honed my attention to detail. I've not always been a detail-oriented person, but making sure that the Blue Book stuff is like the spacing is exactly how the Blue Book wants it, down to that kind of detail, really trains your eye for that. And it is a training process. So I would say, especially if you do a judicial clerkship here 1L summer, which is a majority of what people are doing, or 2L summer even, you're able to use that attention to detail for citations that the clerks need you to run a first pass through or things like that, doing site checks there. And then also anything you turn into a partner is then used to be analyzed at a firm for whether you get a return offer. And that work, if it's not detail oriented, if there's errors all in the citations and your formatting and structure in your writing is wrong, then that could go awry. So there's a lot of benefits to joining a journal. I will say I disagree with the mainstream thought that being on a journal means that you're going to get, that firms are like priority, you must be on a journal. I think that was communicated a lot during law school, but I would disagree with that because during the process of actually applying for the 2L summer positions in my 1L summer, I didn't even know if I was on a journal. So these firms were not looking at that specific line. Now, it could be more important if you're applying 3L year. But I would say that, you know, it's not like game over. There shouldn't be any takeaway that like you're not on a journal all of a sudden you're like doomed for your career. There is nothing like that. It's just something that gives you a little bit of a boost like an organizational role would.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful, and I think maybe comforting for some students. Professor Christensen, did you have any thoughts further on this? And then I'll also ask a question that has come in that's of interest in the Q&A.
Sure. Well, I would just say anecdotally, I mean, as the instructor of the required 1L legal research class, I get my students who've been my students at 1L. They go to their judicial internship. They go to their firm, their small firm, wherever. They go to their big firm in DC. Whatever. They come back. More times than not, they make a beeline to my office the first day of class or whenever they're back from summer break. They say, Professor Christensen, you have no idea how valuable your class was, how I was head and shoulders above people who went to I won't name the law schools, but they do, they, who don't have this kind of, again, the Burke Scholars Program, the required 1L legal research class. That's a graded class, so people do take it seriously. And it's very important. It's on your transcript. You're certified, I've taken this class and I got a grade in it. And a lot that being able to do that and stand out, you know how to use Westlaw, Lexis, Bloomberg law. We introduce you 1L year to all of those standard, kind of the gold standard platforms and resources and tools that lawyers actually use in practice. So you're able to hit the ground running right away as a 1L, make a really good impression, and then get an offer to come back for your 2L year as a 2L, get an offer for a permanent job after graduation, get a really great recommendation from your judge that you worked for, whatever the situation is. So I hear those stories from students all the time, and it is particular to W&L. Again, I went to law school somewhere else. I've worked at other law schools, top law schools, and I know that they do not have a program as strong in research, legal research or scholarly research, as many opportunities that as we have for our students here. So I would just give that resounding plug for Washington Lee and for you making the choice to come here if research is important to you in that same way.
Go ahead, Winnie. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. Just to brag on the program and Professor Christensen's program specifically, like I did not even know before coming to here that we had an esteemed like research and writing program. And I went to my firm the first summer and they were like, oh, you're from W&L. Like they have an amazing legal research and writing program. I didn't even know that. So it's just something that you hear through more firms and less so like on your chambers or all your like websites that are telling you the different information right now as you're deciding.
Thank you so much, Winnie, and all of you for those great comments. I do see one additional question in the Q&A, and I don't know if our panelists have had a chance to see it. It's about opportunities for legislative writing, i.e. developing the law. Don't know if anyone has thoughts or comments that they wanted to throw out on that. I open the floor up.
I know that, so in terms of legislative writing, I do know that people over the summer are able to work in either congressional offices or to work like at DOJ or something, like in the Office of Policy, where you have the opportunity to sort of work the other way. If legal research is a lot of times trying to figure out what the relevant statutes are to the case at hand, I know that a lot of times, obviously lawyers are called on to work backwards and to say, okay, how can we develop? So I do know people can work in policy offices in developing that. In terms of the coursework that we have here, I'm not aware of a legislative writing course, but we do have a statutory interpretation course run by Professor Hasbrook, which I have not taken. Winnie, did you take that?
I'm in it right now.
Okay, I'm gonna let you talk about that because isn't like kind of, don't you have to like write a provision or something as part of that? I don't know. I'll let you talk about it.
Actually drafting, you'll find this amusing, drafting a food and beverage policy for the library right now as a part of our legislative act. I might send it to you, Professor Christensen.
Please do. That's great. I didn't know that.
Where we all play different parts in the legislative body and student factions. I represent the librarian, and we discuss on how we can come together for a bill. We put it to a vote. We're supposed to submit all our documents, including legislative history and committee reports. So absolutely. And Professor Hasbrook is, a leading scholar in many areas, and statutory interpretation is one of those. So we have plenty of professors who are engaged in that kind of work and great courses you can take in that realm.
Thank you all so much. I look forward to reading your piece of legislation that's coming forward, Winnie. And thank you to all of our attendees. This was a great conversation, great questions asked. We hope that this really helped you learn a little bit more about this really important topic. Maybe got some additional questions going for you. And if you do have other questions, I will also put into the chat our general email address here in the admissions office. That's lawadm, LAWADM at WLU.edu. If you have a question for our team or really for the rest of the law school community, our panelists, you feel free to email our office and then we'll work to get the answers that you need. But for now, I'll just say thank you again to our panelists for taking time out of their schedule for this. Really appreciated your thoughtful comments, and thanks to everyone for joining. Have a great rest of your day.